All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, May 29th, 2019. This is a meeting of the City of Evanston Plan Commission. The zoning ordinance directs this body to hear applications for map amendments, text amendments, plan developments, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term plans. This commission will make a recommendation which will be sent to the City Council. First order of business is the determining whether we have a quorum.
All right. Commissioner Draper? Commissioner Dubin? Here. Commissioner Goddard? Here. Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac, or Chair Isaac?
Here.
Commissioner Pagotzi? And Chair Lewis? Okay, we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Our next order of business is approval of the meeting minutes of the Plan Commission meeting of April 10, 2019. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or suggestions for amendment to the proposed meeting minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 10, 2019? Dubin? Motion. Do I have a second? Halleck, second. All in favor? All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, next order of business is proposed text amendment for office uses in residential districts. Case number 19 PLND-0041. I guess before we start that, have a few reminders for the members of the public that are here. If you would, please put your cell phones on silent or vibrate. If anyone would like to speak at tonight's hearing, if you haven't already signed up, we have the sign-up sheet up here. You can come up here now and sign up to speak. Let's see. Summary of. Here you go. Summary of procedure for tonight's meeting will be that city staff will present their report regarding the petition, after which the Plan Commission members may ask questions of the staff. Next, members of the public can ask questions of staff. When speaking, we ask that you come up to the microphone and give your name and address and indicate whether you have been sworn in to testify, which we will do in a few moments. The staff will have the opportunity to answer your questions, and then the members of the public will be given an opportunity to give a sworn testimony, which will include comments, opinion. When speaking again, you come up to the microphone, say your name and address, and make sure you've been sworn in to testify. Then the petitioner will have the opportunity to cross-examine any member of the public. And after the public has completed its testimony, public testimony for this case will be closed. With that, I will turn it over to city staff to present the case. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's swear everyone in. So for everyone who is going to speak tonight, if you can raise your right hand. Do you swear that your testimony will be true and accurate?
I do.
Okay. Thank you.
I can't write it.
All right, I think we're good. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Megan Jones, Neighborhood and Land Use Planner. The proposed text amendment that is in front of the commission this evening comes to us through an aldermanic referral, specifically to look at office uses in our more dense residential zoning districts as they relate to some of our core downtown districts. So a little bit of background on the existing regulations. Our R5 district is intended to provide for infill development with a mix of multifamily residential structures that have a medium density. These can include townhouses, two-family dwellings, three-story walk-up buildings, and courtyard buildings that are common within this particular zoning district throughout the city. The R6 district is actually intended to provide for a high-density residential development, primarily multifamily dwellings that are particularly in and around our downtown districts. I do want to note that office uses are considered a special use within both of these districts, and there is a section within the zoning code that specifically addresses this particular use. It is section 68111, special conditions for office uses. This is that particular section currently. It addresses where the subject properties can be located if they intend to have an office use, specifically the B, C, D, RP, O1, MU, MUE, and MXE, and the I zoning districts. As it exists now, if there is a subject property that intends to have an office use, that particular property must be improved with or located within a dwelling unit that is a single-family detached or two-family dwelling. As office uses are considered a special use, special uses are reviewed by our Zoning Board of Appeals. And in Section C, this lists the various items that would need to be considered when reviewing that particular special use. And this includes the number of potential employees and customers of that particular business, parking, potential traffic, hours of operation, whether or not there be deliveries, and things such as if, for a particular use, if there will be any loud noises, vibrations, or smells that come for that particular property. There's also a section D, which basically says, should the city council approve that special use, the applicant would need to provide documentation to the Cook County assessor that explicitly states that this non-residential use will be a part of that property, and the city would need to obtain a copy of that documentation so we have it on file. Now, switching gears to our existing downtown regulations, we have the D3 Downtown Core Development District, which is intended to provide for the highest density of business infill development and larger scale development within downtown. This district is also intended to encourage a mix of office, retail, and residential uses. The D2 Downtown Retail Core District is intended to define and support the traditional downtown retail shopping function of Evanston. This particular district is characterized by street-level retail storefronts and structures that accent that pedestrian scale. This district also encourages mixed-use developments that would have retail on the ground floor and office or residential use above that would maintain that particular scale and architecture that's identified within our existing plans. Now, for the D2 zoning district, there is a provision that calls for at least 75% of the sidewalk grade floor area of a particular building to be dedicated to retail. However, this particular requirement does not exist within the D3 zoning district. What is proposed this evening is amending Section 68111, which states the special conditions for office uses, specifically Part B of that district. We would be adding language that provides an exception for parcels that are located within the R5 or R6 districts and are adjacent to our D2 and D3 districts. In this latter case, the particular subject property may be improved with office above the ground floor instead of just having the single-family or two-family residential look. And we would also be making a minor change to Section C of this particular section, simply omitting in number 9 residential appearance, so that we can have something that has more of an office appearance and not, again, the single-family or two-family dwelling appearance. There would be no change to Section D, which is not pictured on the screen at the moment. That would be maintained as is. Taking all of this into consideration, currently the parcels that would probably be affected by this particular text amendment are outlined on the map on the screen, outlined in red. They are currently on the northern end of the downtown as well as the eastern and western portions of the downtown. For the purposes of the review of this particular amendment, these are the 4 standards that would need to be met. 1, whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Comprehensive General Plan as adopted and amended from time to time by City Council. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties. And finally, the adequacy of public facilities and services. So with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Am I correct that we will be looking for questions from the public at this point? Should we start with the public or commission? Commission? Okay. All right, commissioners. Does anyone have any questions for staff regarding their presentation?
Why is this necessary? Have there been a lot of developers put off by the difficulty of going through our process of zoning variances? What is the reason that this has come up? What's the reason for the request of this change?
Yes, Commissioner Dubin. It was a referral to the Plan Commission from Alderman Fisk, so I can't speak for her directly on the specific reason for it. She did note a lot of, or several benefits she feels of the potential change, including increasing local tax base, impacting local economy with additional office workers, supporting transit systems with commuters, providing flexibility to the city for moderate-sized office development near the perimeter of downtown, compatibility in terms of height and setbacks with residential buildings permitted in the R5 and R6 zoning districts, to preserve a residential aesthetic with a lobby instead of an active commercial use on the ground floor, to be a quiet use, and to require approval by council as a special use, thereby preserving community involvement. So those are the reasons in the referral that she listed for that.
Oh, sorry. The vacancy rate is in the downtown districts? To follow up on the question.
We can look at that. I know it has been reported recently that office vacancy rates have been declining. We can look for that information during the meeting. I believe it was in a report from our economic development group.
Yeah. I guess it goes to the question of why. Why are we considering this? Besides the alderman request, are there reasons to back this up, which I haven't seen?
From recent studies that I've seen from different developments, we do have I believe it's a single-digit vacancy rate. I think it's changed slightly since I've been working with the city, but I do know there's been a request for or a need for Class A office, so that's a part of this as well.
Could this have an adverse effect on housing? Just a question. Does anyone know?
I think it's difficult to say for certain. I know there is a concern, I think it was outlined within the staff report, for possibly expanding the downtown into the residential areas. So there definitely is that to take into consideration, which is also a reason why we would keep this particular use a special use. So it would have to go through that additional review to ensure that that particular use, that there's any mitigation to possible negative effects.
And then just to follow up on the vacancy question, the economic development 2018 economic development report uses CoStar data and lists that at the end of 2018 there was a vacancy rate under 5% and rents approaching $30 per square foot for office.
Has staff done a count as to how many parcels would be affected by this amendment? Right, because we're talking about R5 and R6, and within those districts, the parcels would need to be adjacent to a D2 or D3 district, right? I mean, that's what the proposal is, and I've got the map up just like you have it up here, and it doesn't seem okay. So every one of those parcels that have the crosshatch on them,
Right, that are outlined in
they're
red.
outlined in red. Okay.
Those could be potentially affected.
And likely would be a zoning lot that's adjacent. So in some cases, there may be multiple parcels that make up one zoning lot, or presumably in the future, if multiple parcels were under the same ownership, they could be considered one zoning lot. So there potentially could be additional parcels if there was common ownership of those multiple parcels. But the map shows essentially 7 areas where there's that adjacency.
So what we'd be doing is allowing office space or office use on floors 2 and above, and any idea or any what would be on the first floor of these buildings? I mean, would we just anticipate there'd just be a lobby for the office use? And so, because we're not anticipating there would be residential on the first floor, right? Even though it would still remain an R5 or R6 use. So, any thought as to how that would work out? I mean, are we just saying that if someone took advantage of these proposed regulations, that it would be effectively they'd be doing it solely for the purpose of making an office building out of that parcel? Is
That's a pretty fair assessment. It's more than likely the ground level will end up being lobby area. So we're not anticipating that there would be retail use, because that would not be allowed within the R5 and R6 district. So it would more than likely just be lobby space.
Are there restrictions in the R zoning district for maintaining parking above ground floor?
You mean with regards to considering the height?
In an R5 district,
considerations, or-
are you allowed to build a ramp and have parking on the second floor?
I don't think there's anything that prohibits that.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
don't know if I could ask this question, but how does this amendment, this text amendment, affect the library parking site?
That is one of the site, as you'll notice on the map there, that is one of the areas that is currently zoned
How
R6.
does it affect the proposal that was before us that we disapproved, that we didn't approve? Does it change anything?
As I understand it now, I mean, that proposal has been tabled at the city council level. I believe that if this amendment proceeded and was adopted by the city council, that would allow for a potential future plan development application at that site without the need to change the zoning of the site through a map amendment as was previously proposed.
But it is a special use currently, and it would be a special use in the future if this amendment was passed, correct?
Yes, right now the only way you can have office in that district, the R6 district
As
in
a
this
special use.
case, is a special use, but only to occupy buildings that were essentially residential buildings, previously single-family homes.
I see. So
that-
a new construction, it would allow new construction that was an office building.
Correct.
That's what this does.
Correct. That would allow it as a special use.
I see. I don't think that, by the way, I don't think that's clear in the writing of the amendment. Maybe I'm just not interpreting it correctly, but
So if I'm understanding this, even with this amendment, an applicant, let's say, for example, the library lot, any applicant would have to still come before us and then also city council to get approval of a special use.
Depends on the size of the development. Many special uses are considered by the zoning board and city council. If there's a development that meets the minimum thresholds for a plan development, then it would come before the plan commission and city council as opposed to ZBA and city council.
Do you know if the voting requirements for approval are different?
Yes, an amendment, if there's opposition to the amendment with a petition of over 30%, property owners within 500 feet of the property, if that amendment is submitted before the close of plan commission hearing, then there's an additional majority of 7 votes is required at city council to approve that map amendment.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Okay. At this time, I'd like to let everyone here know that people or persons or groups with an ownership interest in property that's affected by this amendment, within 500 feet of any of the properties that are cross-hatched in red, may make a request in writing to continue this hearing to a date certain that the Plan Commission will determine today. So if I'm sorry, the reason for the continuance must be for the purpose of presenting evidence to rebut testimony that you've heard today from the applicant. Do I have the applicant is staff, City of Evanston. Okay, I'm sorry. If someone has a request for continuance in writing, I can take it now. Okay. Okay, it appears that we've received a request for continuance in accordance with our rules. We will continue with the hearing today. However, we will not make any final determination, and at the end of our meeting, we will determine the date for the next date that this case will be continued to. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to open up the floor to members of the public to ask questions of the staff with respect to their proposal. I will remind you that at this point, we're not looking for comments or opinions. We're looking for questions. So if you have a question for staff, you can pose it. If you don't wish to ask questions today and would rather wait until the next meeting, you can just say that you pass, and we'll keep your name in line. You'll be first at the next hearing. Okay? With that, Janet Steidel.
My name is Janet Steidel. I live at 1401 Davis Street. There are a lot of questions. I have this one question about why or if this is going to go in front of the Zoning Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Plan Commission. On the website, it says that that's what this committee does. It reviews text amendments and map amendments per need basis in public hearings, and that they make recommendations to the Plan Commission. It doesn't appear that that happened, but I wonder, my question is, with all the questions that you all had about the purpose of this amendment, I think that it needs to have I'm asking if it needs further eyes on it to understand exactly what this will mean. It's kind of a request question, you know.
So now is the time to ask questions of staff, not of the commissioners.
Of staff.
Yes.
Oh, I have several questions of staff. So the question was raised, what is the intent of this amendment? And is this amendment kind of targeting these areas for office development, these areas that are mostly residential in our city that's strapped for residential stock? Is this about tearing down those buildings to build office buildings, or is it about adaptively reusing those residential buildings for office buildings? I have a lot of questions.
Okay. So we'll go with that one.
All right.
Staff?
I think as stated earlier, this text amendment was a referral from Alderman Fisk, so I don't know the staff can adequately answer that question.
Okay, so then my question is, now what? I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, that's my question.
I don't know that that's the type of question that can be answered by staff. I think your questions need to be a little more objective in scope.
Okay, so is the intent to encourage demolition of buildings that may be already on these sites in order to develop office building.
Okay,
Is
so
that a
I-
question?
It is a question, but I believe that you asked, your previous question was with respect to the intent, and I believe staff answered the question, that
The intent is not known.
that they're not in a position to answer what the intent is. I think we can focus on what the effect or what the anticipated effect, unintended consequences. There's a whole host of questions that can be asked. I think you've already asked about the intent.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Marcia Kaur. I'm sorry. Can you come up to the? If there are questions, if you have comments, there's going to be an opportunity for you to make comments later in the meeting.
I'm really asking for a continuance so that I can, think harder about this whole thing.
And you'll have an opportunity to ask questions or make comments at the next hearing. So if you want to just pass, I'll mark you down as pass, and you'll be the first one to
That's fine.
go next time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vicki Burke.
Hi, I'm Vicki Burke. I live at 1409 Rosalie Street in Evanston. I'm the president of the Center for Women's History and Leadership and History and Leadership at the WCTU Historic Site, president of their board. Also a past president of the Women's Club. My question is specifically, I want to concentrate on the map and the most concentrated area of the map that is circled in red, which incorporates the Women's Club of Evanston and the WCTU historic property. I don't know if you have a pointer, but it's the long, it's right, the library parking lot is also part of that group. It also incorporates the condo at the end of the block and the condo building that is at the end of the block to the south. All of these properties, owners were part of the petition that was presented that forced the supermajority vote that needed to take place for the library parking lot to be developed as the office building. My question to staff is, how did we get included in this very concentrated property? You've got a condo building at one end, a condo building at the other end, and you've got two historic properties that are that fit under the legal non-conforming uses because they existed before there were zoning laws. Can you answer that question for me? Why? It seems like that area has been targeted big time.
As stated, it was referral from Alderman Fisk, and the referral had to do with R5 and R6 properties that abut the D2 and D3 districts. And so those properties, as you see on the map, are adjacent to D2 or D3 properties.
But an entire block? Half of a block?
Yes, so as you can see on the map,
Well, I
there's
know,
two
I can
shades of
see.
blue.
I live it. I walk the alley. But you've got condo at one end, you've got condo at the other end. The historic district, we have two houses, property houses that we pay property tax on that are residential. And I
think to help answer the question is that just to the west of that area is in blue are D2 and D3 districts, and that area, including including your parcel, is adjacent to the D2 and D3 districts and is included in an R5 and R6 district. That's just, it's, yeah.
Location. It's curious, though.
Thank you. Kira Kelly.
Hi, this is a question I'm not sure you'll have the answer to, but...
I'm sorry, can you,
Oh.
I'm not sure if I've said this for everyone, but if you can say your
I'm
your
sorry.
name and your address before you start.
Kira Kelly, 2436 Orrington
Great, thank you.
Avenue. My question is, well, the library parking lot high-rise, which was defeated by council, city council a few weeks ago, was required to pass with a supermajority, as was mentioned, because the residents within 500 feet, 30% of the property owners filed a petition for that. So at the next meeting, it was brought up for reconsideration, and we've been kind of in a holding pattern. We were told it was going to come up in the next few weeks again. However, I'm wondering if this does pass, does that change the terms and the threshold of the reconsideration vote of the library parking lot?
So if there were amendment to be approved, if this amendment as proposed were to be approved by the city council, there would, an office building could be constructed with a special use, and if it were of a certain size, over 20,000 square feet in construction, would also require planned development. So that planned development and special use would go to the Plan Commission and to the City Council. There would not be a need to rezone the property to a downtown district. So therefore, there would not be the potential for a petition to oppose a rezoning.
Well, it's already, the petition's already been filed. It was a reconsideration. The attorney actually clarified to all the aldermen that it has to be the exact same ordinance to be reconsidered. Nothing can change about it. So we're it's in the middle of this process. I mean, actually, to be honest, everyone who's been working on it for years and years thought it was finished, and it was really a kind of a surprise. So, yeah, my question is, it's kind of mid-process. Are the terms changing in the middle of that? And if so, is it going to come through council since we're being delayed 3 weeks or so with this continuance? Is that project going to be held until this vote, or will it be on the docket for city council before these terms are potentially changed? I don't know if that makes sense.
So I think there's a few questions there. One, would the applicant for the library lot have to reapply if this were to pass? I think is one of the first question, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, usually it's sort of like a project. It's completed. It's, really was voted on, and this is like a very rare thing that it's being reconsidered in its entirety as is. So are the laws going to change in the middle of this process? Yeah, I guess. Since
So
it has to be the exact same ordinance to be officially reconsidered.
So I believe there would have to be a new application for a plan development and for in this case, if it approved, a special use to develop an office building. And then that would be renoticed within a 1,000-foot radius and would come to this body at the Plan Commission for recommendation to City Council.
Okay,
So
is that confirmed by the attorney? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it cannot be, the terms, the threshold for the votes cannot be changed in the middle without going back to the beginning of the process, just have a whole new. Okay.
That's our understanding right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's confirmed by the attorney. Okay, thank you.
All right. Sarah Vanderwicken?
Hi, I'm Sarah Vanderwicken. I live at 1864 Sherman, which is one of the properties that is up for rezoning. It's at the corner of Sherman and Emerson. the same block as Lou Malnati's, and that whole block is on there as red. So what I wanted to know is what are the implications of this for that block? And what do we need to know in terms of what could happen with the properties on that block, particularly like Lou Malnati's? I don't think anything's going to happen to the co-op that I live in. But if Lou Malnati's was to sell their property, could there be an office building then built as of right on that block?
If, in the event that Lou Malnati's were to sell their building, and an office building could possibly be built there, they would still have to go through the special use process. So it would not be by right. So they couldn't just come in with building permit plans and request to build that particular structure. It would have to go through a review process in order to be built. And that's if the hypothetical situation of Lou Malnati's selling their building happens.
Okay. And there's also another restaurant that's there that I think is trying to get sold, and so probably that actually would be more likely. But what I wanted to know, another thing I wanted to know is what are the height restrictions or story restrictions for building within this changed zoning designation?
I actually have a chart. The zoning heights would not change. So the bulk requirements would stay the same, both the base requirements for the underlying zoning district, and in the event that something is a planned development, those would not be changed.
Okay, and what
So
does
the
that
existing
translate
heights.
into in terms of height? How many stories would the 50 feet be?
I'm not positive what that particular zoning district is, but these are the heights in this particular column here. Those are the base maximum heights. And that's if a building comes in basically by right and is not a planned development. If there is a development that comes in that does meet the thresholds to become a planned development, then they would be able to request site development allowances that, if approved, could get them up to these heights in this particular column.
But do you know how many stories that translates into? Say the 85 feet? I mean, is that like 10 stories or 5 stories or?
Can I answer
It's
that?
more like 7 or 8
More
stories,
like 8?
depending on.
Yeah,
Okay.
It depends on, can I answer that? It depends on the type of building. If it's an office building, you can do the math. If it's a residential building, you can assume 10 feet per typical floor. If it's
Okay.
an office building, assume 14 feet per typical
see.
floor.
Okay, thank you.
So then just divide.
Okay, all right. And what is the what are the requirements for notifying people within the area? So, and is that both within the area that's affected and at the perimeter of however many feet it is outside? Is that it?
If it's a planned development,
No,
then-
for this change in designation. I'm presuming that people need to be notified before a decision is made to be able to talk about it, right? Isn't that what the notification is, or the percentage of residents in the area that you're looking to contest this?
You're asking with respect to this case, the properties that are affected by this case?
Yes.
So what the notice requirement was for this
Yes.
case?
What is the notice requirement for this?
For a text amendment
Yes.
to the zoning ordinance,
Yes.
the requirement is a notice in the newspaper, which is published in the Evanston Review in this case, I believe. If it were to be a map amendment, it would be a notification within a radius.
Wouldn't this be a map amendment? No?
This is a text amendment to affect a number of properties in the city that are in this circumstance. So this is a text amendment request.
Okay. So it is up to people in that area to contact. Is there some way to get information about the names and identity and so on of people in the area that you could contact? I mean, how do people do that?
Sure. So that information, the taxpayer of records available through the Cook County Treasurer. Or the Cook County has a property tax portal that has some of that information consolidated together.
Is there a method by which a member of the public can get radius and address information with respect to a radius from the city clerk? Or is that only with respect to like plan developments and map amendments?
Yeah, I mean, the taxpayer of record's public information that's available from those sources as stated. The city has some of that information. It's a little outdated from the data that we received from Cook County on that, but if you had specific requests, we could take a look at that for you.
Well, how do you know if you've made your 30%? I mean, do you have figures for like how many people there are so you know if you've got 30%?
So the 30% has to do with the map amendment request.
Oh,
So
okay. It
this is
doesn't
just
apply
the
to a text amendment.
That's correct.
Okay, so what percentage of people need to, does any percentage of people need is needed to stop this kind of thing or not?
There is not that similar requirement with the map amendment. So
Okay.
the process would be the Plan Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, and then it would be a majority vote of City Council whether to adopt an amendment changing the zoning ordinance.
And you're talking about the text amendment now?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then I have another question it's specific to the library parking lot, which is city-owned land. If this were not to go through and there is not another attempt made for an office building, or if that's just a dead issue, would it be possible for the city to provide that land at a lower than market rate basis to a developer who would use it to build affordable housing, or at least a good amount of affordable housing, and be able to structure it around, or be able to be required to keep it in consistency with the architecture and the height and so on of the buildings around there? Is there any reason why that couldn't happen?
The zoning answer is currently within the R6 zoning district, so it allows for multifamily residential. So that could be a request made to develop multifamily. As far as the answer about selling the property and the ways it could be sold, that's a City Council decision.
But is there any legal barrier to that, or any other kind of barrier that you know of?
It's a City Council decision. I don't know of it, but it's not something that staff could articulate as far as whether the City Council wants to entertain selling the property for that use.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina Payden. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Hayden, yes,
Hayden,
that's correct.
great.
Yay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tina Payden, and I live at 1122 Emerson Street. To me, next time, since Alderman Fisk was the one who requested it, seems like she should be here next meeting so she could answer some of these questions, because you all don't seem to know what's really going on because she was the one who requested it. And I'm assuming that Alderman Fisk was the one who decided these areas. Is that correct?
The request had to do with R5 and R6 districts that were, or properties that are adjacent to D2 and D3, and so staff took that information and put it on the map here to illustrate what those properties are.
But it's a request of Alderman Fisk?
Yes, it had to do with the R5 and R6. They're adjacent to D2 and D3, and so, again, we're just showing which properties would be affected.
Okay, so at 811 or 813 Emerson, you made a north downtown Evanston zoning in order to get that building passed. Is this what's happening with the library parking lot?
I think you're referring to there's a north downtown plan that was
Right.
considered.
So,
that
no,
was not
it was-
adopted.
Yes, it was changed, but you all put it forth because I was in the north downtown Evanston originally, my property, and I came and screamed about it, and you took me out of the plan, but you all created a new zoning in order to get the 811 or 813, whatever address they're using, building passed. So it looks like that this is something similar in order to get the library building passed. It also happened, a couple of years ago, so that building could be passed, right? You made the North Downtown Evanston?
Those two particular projects aren't actually connected in that way. The North Downtown Plan was an attempt to look at that particular area that's north of downtown and possibly rezone it. The council decided not to adopt those recommendations. So the North Downtown Plan is essentially still a draft that has not been approved and has not gone forward, and there's been no rezoning to match those recommendations. The rezoning, I think that you're referring to for 811 Emerson, that was a separate project that was part of the plan development review. And I believe that was rezoned to C1A in order for that to be built. But again, that was a separate project from the North Downtown Plan process. And that essentially probably would have gone through regardless of whether or not the North Downtown Plan.
Okay, so just only the buildings in red is being considered to change the zone, or is the R6? So one of my properties is zoned an R6, and it is a commercial building. So the Cook County Assessor's Office already considers it a commercial building. I'm being taxed as commercial. So but it's zone R6. So right here at Emerson between Ridge and Maple, I have a R6, but I have a commercial building. So if you change that, does that affect me or no?
I think where your building is located, it is not adjacent to the D2 or the D3 district. So this particular text amendment deals with the R5 and R6 districts that are adjacent to D2 and D3. I don't think that where your property
No, mine is adjacent to RP, which is
right,
something else.
Right, which is not a part of this particular text amendment. So your property would not be affected by this particular text amendment.
Okay, so when I come before you shortly about my property, because this is considered spot zoning, and every time I come to the zoning department to talk to them about my property and changing the zoning, everybody looks in the sky and says, this is spot zoning. This is spot zoning. You do it throughout the whole city, so I shouldn't have a problem when I come back, correct? But Alderman Fisk needs to be here next time to explain some answers to everybody's questions. Thank you.
Marianne Benvemiste. Yes? Close, all right.
So, yes, I am Marianne, otherwise known as Patsy Benveniste, and I live at 400 Ridge Avenue. And at the suggestion of Mr. Isaac, who explained that staff could not address questions regarding intent of Alderman Fisk or anybody else with interest in this text amendment. At his suggestion, I'd like to ask you, staff, Mr. Mangum and Ms. Jones, what you believe could be the unintended consequences of this text amendment and the zoning change. You mentioned that as the kind of question that we could ask.
I guess I can speak to the intended consequences that would affect.
Well, the intended consequences are. Well, go ahead and speak to the intended consequences.
Sure. So
except if you have anything new to say, other than what we've already heard.
I can tell you what would be affected in the zoning ordinance. It would allow for office development with a special use in those districts.
Okay, well, that part I understood. I think we all do. What about unintended consequences?
And actually, I'm not sure if you were able to look at the staff report, but that did outline some of the possible benefits and possible concerns.
Concerns. We're interested in concerns.
So there could be meeting the need for more office that has been stated with more recent developments that have been proposed. But within that staff report, we do bring up the concern of the possibility of expanding the downtown into residential districts. And that's, I think, part of the reason, even with that concern, that we're sticking with the residential districts that have a higher density and are already have structures that are a little bit taller and have a greater bulk and density consistently. But there was discussion about possible effects within that.
Compromising current housing in the downtown area. Anything else relative to increasing the density of development in downtown Evanston? Any other concerns? I can imagine there's many. There are many consequences of increasing density at the scale that, for instance, the library development would entail.
If you have more concerns that you want to express, you can answer the question. Otherwise, I believe you've answered it.
We pretty much have brought up the main concern about possibly expanding the downtown. But again, that's why we would be keeping this as a special use. With the Zoning Board of Appeals, when they review their special uses, they do look at intended or unintended effects of the special use or any variances that are requested for a particular project. So that would be something that they would look at as well. And also with the concerns that I think I actually listed that the Zoning Board has to look at, those would be things that they would need to consider before approving a special use.
Okay.
So they do definitely look at different things that could affect
spectrum
neighboring
of
properties.
issues. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anna Roosevelt.
Yes, Anna Roosevelt, 1028 Judson, but I'm here as a board member of the Southeast Evanston Association, which has asked us to come to the meeting. Since you're not taking comment, I will...
If I may, we'll be taking comment later.
Today?
Today. So
Okay.
if you'd like to
Sure.
wait until then.
That's fine. I do think, however, that some of the answers to questions may not have clarified the issue, because some of the aspects of the this project that we have heard about, we had our board meeting yesterday, are not reflected in the answers to the questions. But since I don't want to get into commentary now, I won't go further with that.
Okay. Thank you. Harris Miller.
Good evening. I'm Harris Miller, 905 Sherman Avenue, apartment B5. I have a few questions for staff. The first one is, how will the historic properties be affected, such as the Francis Willard House? I know they have some offices in the back, and then there's an 1899 apartment building that's on Clark Street. So that's my first question. How will those properties be affected?
If they're properties that fall within the R5 and R6,
Right.
as some of those were mentioned, additional development uses could be requested there, such as office.
Okay. And then the other question is, can these properties be grandfathered in or rezoned into some other type of zoning district in order to keep their historic integrity intact?
That's not part of this request. A property owner could request a map amendment to change the zoning of their property where they are, so that would be a different matter.
Okay. And also, I understand that perhaps the Francis Willard Group, they may have grants, and how will those grants be affected on those historic properties? I just want to hear what staff has to say about that.
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that.
Okay.
So I think one thing that can be expanded upon is that this proposed amendment doesn't change the historic nature of the buildings, nor does it change the regulations that govern historic properties in the city of Evanston. The properties that you mentioned would still be subject to those ordinances, and nothing here would require any changes in the uses of those properties.
Got it. Just my main concern is, I understand that there might be a variance with use, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around how these buildings will be affected by perhaps the library parking lot development that's in the most concentrated area near Church Street, as well as the Women's Club. That's the other question I had.
I think the impacts of a particular development would be specific to that development. You could take a look. We have staff reports about that and the potential impacts of the proposed development on that site. This text amendment isn't necessarily specific to any impacts. It would be a development proposal at any particular site here that then would have potential impacts on the adjacent properties.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Marge Gamboni? Gambo. Okay. You're passing for next. Okay, great. And then Mark Rich? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Mark Tendum.
Tendum, sorry.
I don't want to sound a smart ass, but I do. My questions are comments, but I'll ask them as questions. I've read reports.
If you have comments, there's going to be an opportunity right after this to make comments.
All right. My one question is, it was brought up that in terms of residential office, development, the first floors, several floors of parking would be permitted. Is that in keeping with what was referred to as the aesthetic of a residential neighborhood when it was discussed how that might be more compatible than a retail storefront for a commercial building? So my question is there any clarity on that, and how can we find out, and what can we do if not? Because I think a parking structure is quite different, which is permitted in an office building, but quite different than keeping with some sort of aesthetic that would be more compatible in a residential neighborhood than a retail operation. If you have answers, I'm all ears, but I'm just wondering, that's a question I have.
Well, if I may, in an R5 or R6 district, you can have, multiple dwelling units, and with those dwelling units, you're required to provide parking. If parking's allowed on the first floor and second floor, as staff said, there would still be, whether the use was residential or office, you still have, effectively a parking garage for the residential. And so the aesthetic, I understand what you're saying about the aesthetic being different between an office building and a residential building. But the parking component of it, there's parking for both.
Right, but we're not talking, I understand that in an office building, it could be more than 2, 3, 4, 5 stories. It could be quite a expansion of parking on the first floor, which just becomes a darkened monolith at night. And I'm wondering if would that be permitted in this special use in this newly proposed ordinance?
I think that would likely be something that our design and project review committee would look at, because I agree we would not want to have a whole blank wall or
But that has no
space
teeth.
with.
That has no teeth. We've seen what Dapper has done with regard to the library parking lot building, and I totally agree with them, but it has not stopped council from nearly approving it. So I'm wondering what can be done in terms of, if this idea is to go forward, how can we guarantee that this property would be appropriate for a residential neighborhood and not just a darkened series of floors to accommodate parking for a ill-conceived office building? So, I think it's a valid question. I think we need to follow through on it, because I can see that happening, especially with regard to the proposed parking lot proposal, which would be many, many floors of parking at the ground level. Okay?
So, I mean, again, that would be something that our design and project review committee would look at, and if this were the case where it was something that needed a special use, the zoning board would look at that as well. I would think it might be possible to have conditions with regards to what that appearance could be, but ultimately it is really the final decision of the council on whether they would follow what staff recommendations or zoning board or plan commission recommendations would be for that.
Yeah, not putting a lot of faith in that. I'm just wondering what could be, if in fact we are going to make an exception with this intrusion into residential neighborhoods, what other precautions can we put? What could be made? What could be added to this proposal that would guarantee that it would be more in keeping with the aesthetic of the neighborhood, which was what Alderman Fisk refers to in one of her statements, rather than something like a storefront or retail front that would not be fitting in the aesthetic with the neighborhood. I would consider our parking structure of multiple stories not to be compatible with the residential neighborhood either. So I'm just wondering, what can be done? Who's to say that we wouldn't be a storefront on the first floor? How are we going to guarantee that if we can't guarantee that it wouldn't be a monolith of parking?
Well, I don't think staff can make a guarantee. Ultimately, all of the zoning ordinance is ultimately at the discretion of the city council, as comprised from time to time. So none of the zoning anywhere in Evanston is set in stone, and it's subject to public comment, subject to your elected officials. That's just
I do understand.
It's a living object.
I do understand that. I just wonder, there have to be safeguards that we can build into these unusual requests, especially when we know that the point of this whole request is very specific. So I'm wondering what those might be, and how can you help us with that? Is staff recommending approval of this?
Staff doesn't approve. Doesn't approve. They're making the presentation.
Okay.
We make recommendation of yes, no, or yes with some changes, and then the ultimate decision maker is the city council. Okay. So
there is no recommendation.
There are no decision makers here at this meeting. We're just reviewing and making a recommendation.
But staff is not making a recommendation.
Staff is not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, the period for questions is over. We will now move to public comment. Public comment will be, public comment or testimony is limited to 2 minutes, and so I'll go through the list again and ask if anyone wants to make a comment. Again, you can either speak today, or you can speak at the next hearing on this case. We'll start at the top again. Janet Steitel. Okay. Marcia Kerr. Okay. Marcia passed as well. Vicki Burke. Vicky Burke passes. Kira Kelly. If it's just one, we'll allow it. Come on up.
This is a question for Megan. You mentioned that the Zoning Board of Appeals would look at unintended consequences before approving something like this, but I don't know if this is accurate, but a news article says that if the Plan Commission approves this proposed change, it would go directly to council for a final vote. So I was wondering when the Zoning Board of Appeals is ever involved.
I think it was misunderstood with the particular process. For this particular text amendment, the Plan Commission would look at the information that's been presented and make a recommendation to council. Should the text amendment be approved, and actually already, the office uses are considered a special use within the R5 and R6 zoning districts. The changes that would affect the particular section I mentioned earlier would still be a part of that special use process. The Zoning Board of Appeals reviews the special uses. So that would be when the zoning board takes a look at I believe it was 10 different items that they'd want to consider before approving a special use or recommending approval for a special use.
But
won't
all of these buildings be planned developments, which never involve the Zoning Board of Appeals?
Okay, so to put it another way, if this amendment passes through City Council, then should a property owner who has property in an R5 or R6 district that is adjacent to a D2 or D3 district want to develop property into an office building, they would then have to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals and request for a special use in order to build that office building. The Zoning Board of Appeals would look at all of the factors and make a determination whether the application for that office building would have a net positive or net negative effect to the surrounding areas, and thereby determine whether that special use would be approved and the office building be built, or be denied, no office building.
And that's assuming that it wouldn't be a planned development? Just my experience, all of these kind of buildings are planned developments, and they never...
So one thing that staff mentioned, and we're getting beyond the one question, but one thing staff mentioned was that, for example, the library lot, that property would no longer require a zoning change. Okay, wouldn't be required. So it would go still to the Zoning Board of Appeals, but it wouldn't be a planned development anymore.
I thought the size alone of we're getting into the weeds, but the size alone of a planned development makes it a planned development.
That was the answer that was given. Okay. Of course, you can call during business hours and talk to.
Yeah, because I've followed, unfortunately, a lot of these, and they're always, they never go to the.
Okay, so I'm going to start the clock. Oh, you don't have any?
Well, I'm looking at the code here, and it says.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
Am I starting the clock on your comments?
No.
No?
I guess I'll.
You're going to pass, or you're done?
Yeah, I guess I'll be done.
Okay.
But,
all right, great.
Okay.
Yep. Ms. Vanderwicken.
Yeah, I guess I need some clarification. I was really confused before because...
I'm sorry. I have to limit this to comment because we can't...
Okay, well, my comment is that I'm confused about the purpose of the continuance, because I understood when you initially talked about it that was to give time to get people, and I thought there was a percentage in there stated about some 30% or something related to that. It would be very helpful, my comment is, it would be very helpful if you restate the point of the continuance and what can be done in the interim and what can be done then.
Okay, so this case will be continued to another date. At that date, we will ask the staff whether they have any more information that they want to present with respect to their application. We will ask questions of staff based upon that new information. Public will have the opportunity to ask questions and provide comment. And at the end of that meeting, the Plan Commission will make a recommendation one way or another.
Okay, so it'll just be basically a repeat.
Take some kind of action.
Okay, all right. All right.
Thank you.
Chair Isaac.
Yeah. Please.
Assistant Attorney, City Attorney DeBose. Just for the record, staff will not be presenting new information at the next meeting. The purpose of the continuance is to allow the person who requested the continuance to prepare evidence to rebut certain statements or evidence that have been presented to this point.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Tina Payden.
So I would just like to make a comment about office space in downtown Evanston. So the story now is we're in dire need of office space downtown Evanston. For those who have been here long enough, as you will recall, where E2 is presently located at 1890 Maple, there was an office building. And everybody said, oh, we don't need any office space. Let's tear down the building and build this giant complex. So it looks like that everybody is making up things as they go, because that building was built as part of the research park, which started back in 1985. And I'm the only house left there, so I know all the details. And that building sat vacant the entire time it was there. It was an office building, and they said they didn't need office space. Now all of a sudden we need office space. So it looks like it's just finagling around with whatever project wants to be passed by. But remember, that building was vacant for years and years and years. And they said, we don't need office space. Tear it down.
Thank you. Marianne Benveniste. But I did better that time? Benveniste. Anna Roosevelt.
There were basically two comments that the Southeast Evanston Association asked me to put forward. The first one was that it does seem that this ordinance change will reduce the effectiveness of neighbors' attitudes toward projects. Is that correct? Because of the change in the requirement of the number of votes.
I'm not sure if anyone's read that article, but now is the time for comment, not questions.
Right. So our concern is that it seems that the passage, first of all, that I should say it's not a concern exactly, but that we do understand, unless someone contradicts us, that the proposed ordinance change has the purpose of assisting the library project, and that the wider effects of it are not the goal. So that's the first observation. The second is that the ordinance change will change the ability of neighbors to have an effect on the kind of vote result that will allow a development. And the third, our comment is a little bit broader, and that is that this kind of ordinance change has rather wide implications for the nature of residential neighborhoods and for the location of office developments. And we feel that it's much more logical to consider this kind of change in the broader perspective of the goals for Evanston downtown and surrounding areas near downtown. So that, can you see that this kind of discussion should take place with a broader kind of angle, looking at what are the main goals for Evanston for the next 5 years or 10 years, and exactly in terms of residential and office development, and how does this assist or not those goals? So we would like to see a broader view. We'd like to see this kind of rather big change being proposed in the ordinance to have some relationship to a general plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, that was Ms. Roosevelt, yes? Okay. So make sure I'm on the right. Don't skip anyone here. Harris Miller.
Okay, good evening once again. Just a few comments here, and I know there's a continuum to another meeting, but I just want to say I do not recommend following through on this text amendment because there are these historic buildings such as the Francis Willard House and the 1899 apartment building. I'm just concerned about the aesthetics of that neighborhood by Church and Chicago Avenue. I know a number of other people who live over there, so I just am concerned about the characteristics of the neighborhood. And also, I love history, so it would be a shame to see drastic changes to a neighborhood that's been there since before I was born, and well before most of us have. Also, I just think there might be some things that may be considered inappropriate for the properties or for those small businesses. I know the Celtic Knob pub might be affected on Church, so I would definitely talk to the business owners in that neighborhood. And lastly, I really do wish that Alderman Fisk was here. I do live in the 4th Ward, but I truly care about the city of Evanston. I've only lived here a year, so it would just be a real shame to see something done that the residents don't really care for. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Marge Gambone.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Marge Gambo, and I live at 927 Michigan. But I'm really here as a upcoming board member for the Women's Club of Evanston, and I'm just here to show you that the Women's Club is involved, is interested, and we haven't changed our position on the library lot. So I would just like that written in the record, and I'm sure we'll be here at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mark Tendon. Closer.
Hi, Mark Tenton again. I think Ms. Roosevelt kind of summed up the core of my concerns. I think the Southeast Evanston Neighbors Association has sort of cut to the quick, and I think we all know why we're here tonight. My biggest concern is that I don't see anything stopping this, regardless of your recommendation or staff's attitude toward this. And it sort of, as you can tell by my comments previously and others, it certainly raises my anxiety about this project to a new height. I've seen I've seen less of an effort by the Republican majority in the House trying to kill Obamacare than I have, seen with our city council members trying to get this parking lot project through. What about this project is so important? I'm not opposed to developing it. I voted and supported for the RFP when it first came out. I've always been in support of developing that parcel, but this particular development is flawed, and I think that it just makes me very suspicious and very concerned about our future when things like this seem to get ramrodded through every committee and onto council. And I fear at this point there's very little we can do to stop it. So I will certainly keep up my efforts. But I think that a lot of people in this community realize it's a bad idea. It's the wrong development in the right place, or the right place with the wrong development. I'm not quite sure, but it certainly isn't what this city should have. Thank you for your time. Sorry you're in this position. I don't think it's an easy one, because I don't think there was a lot that you could provide tonight without the presence of the alderman who requested this this ordinance changed. So thank you for getting us through this, and we'll talk again.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Is there anyone else who didn't sign up that would like to make a comment? I think we got everyone. Okay, great. With that, and based upon the receipt of a request for continuance, this matter, I believe, is going to be continued until, oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. All right, I've been updated on the process. Do I have a motion to continue this matter to, I believe, June 12th, which is the next, June 12th, 2019, which is the next scheduled Plan Commission meeting?
So move.
Pagozzi? Okay. Goddard motions. Pagozzi seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? All right, the ayes have it. One note for public, there will be our statement that this case is continued to June 12th, 2019 is the only required notice of its continuance. There will be no other notice of that, of the continuance of this case to that date. With that, the new business is the new business is completed. Is there public comment on any other issue? Okay. Can you come up so everyone on TV land has the benefit?
I'm Janet Steidel. I live at 1401 Davis. I have a question. Is this considered a special meeting of the Plan Commission, or is this a regular meeting? And I know that okay, that's one question.
The June 12th.
No, this meeting.
This was the regular. Oh no, this was a special meeting. Although I believe
your agenda said it was not.
This was a specially scheduled meeting for the Plan Commission. The June 12th meeting that is proposed for the continuance of this particular matter is for June 12th.
That's a regularly scheduled meeting, second Wednesday of the month.
So, but had this issue been brought up at a regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting, a request for a continuance would have been for the next meeting, which would be 4 weeks away. No, but this was not at a regular meeting. What I'm really asking you is for a continuation a normal continuation that would be 4 weeks away from this hearing because of these circumstances.
Our rules don't require a minimum amount of time for a continuance. There's nothing that I see there. So by implication, taking it to its absurd conclusion, we could have continued this to tomorrow.
But
or next Wednesday, or 3 months from now.
I understand that. But if this were at a normally scheduled Plan Commission meeting, there would be 4 weeks for information to be gathered that is to support.
What I'm saying is that there's no requirement that we continue it to another regularly scheduled meeting. We can continue it to a special meeting that we decide on today, here, right now.
Would you? I know you already, did a motion, but would you consider? Because would you consider
that matter is closed? The continuance is to June 12th, 2019.
That's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate.
Thank you.
It's unfair. I'm not done. And I feel that it is unfair because this text amendment affects a lot of properties. It affects properties across 3 different wards. There aren't a lot of people here who know about this change that will affect their properties. So guess what? It's up to us, the people who are here, who care, who actually found out about this, to contact all of those people who may have concerns so that they can show up and understand what is supposedly going on. 2 weeks is not a lot of time. That's why I think that I would like a different consideration that this be continued for 4 weeks, which would have been a normal continuance if this had been scheduled on the normal schedule. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I understand.
And do you understand my reasoning for
do.
that?
I understand. I do. We've decided it's going to be June 12th, 2019, and that's the date it's going to be.
I had earlier asked, I have one more question. I had earlier asked if you would refer this to the zoning committee of the Plan Commission, because there seem to be so many questions about this one.
That is something
that you do on your own.
That is something the commission will take up on deliberations once all public testimony is done.
So that would be something that might happen on the 12th.
Correct.
I hope you don't get frustrated with me. I just really want to understand.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Gozi, do I have a second?
Second.
Goddard, second. All in favor? All against? The ayes have it. The Plan Commission of the City of Evanston is now adjourned.